So in the last lecture, we started to talk about the importance of tidy data formats and data types. In this lecture, I'm going to go over the first thing that I will always do with my tidy set of data before I start doing additional work with it. And that is setting it up as something called a table. Now, you might think that, well, isn't this a table already? Well, in Excel, since Excel 2007, we've been able to select a bunch of data and come over to here and select this option to format as table. So if I come over here, I can select a format like that. And because I've got one cell and there's no blank columns and no blank rows, it automatically selects this whole range for me. It's identified that I have column headers up the top here. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And it's automatically formatted all this data for me. Now, the nice thing about this, besides kind of looking pretty and being able to really quickly kind of retheme it with different styles, is that it has a whole bunch of options with the data. So for example, I have auto filters. So one of the things that people often do with the data is quickly add some auto filters so they can get an idea of what the data looks like. You can see here that if I click on date, it's got special date logic that allows me to automatically group up the years and months. And with the other fields as well, they'll have specific filters. So for instance, I've got number filters where you can do greater than, less than, top 10, all these different types of things, which is really quite handy. Now, tables have been around since Excel 2007, and I would consider them to be an absolutely essential component of one, making your life easier, but two, also making better, more robust models. To illustrate this, I'm going to take a copy of the data in our table and paste it back again as a non-table format. So I'm just going to copy this here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a paste special values, values and number formats, and that way we'll retain our date. I'll come over here, and there we go. Now, there's a few problems when working with data which is structured like this. Now, one of the first things that people will usually want to do is maybe add something like a sum to their value column. So if I come over here and I click on this column here, I can see that the sum of this column is 67,500. What a lot of people will do is they will come to this bottom cell here and they will add a sum, clicking this button or typing the formula or using a shortcut key like Alt equals to automatically get the sum of all of these values. Now, that's a nice quick way of doing things, but now if we ever want to do something like sum up column J, then you can see down here that our summary is doubling the value. Now, you may not necessarily see the issue with this, but fundamentally what the problem is that in this format here, Excel doesn't actually know where the data starts or ends and where your summary begins. When you start working with data, you often need to update or replace your data sets. These data sets will grow in size. Now, using the traditional methods where we have a formula here which references a very specific range of data, when that range of data changes size, your formulas become out of date. Now, even if you're not using any formulas at all, which is what I'm going to be showing you throughout these lectures, Excel will still need to refer to ranges that look like this. And if you store your data in these formats, it will also not automatically update. Now, to get around the fact that ranges don't automatically update, what a lot of people do is that they go back to basically selecting these entire columns, which, as mentioned, if you do this, well, it's going to include all the new values that get added to this, but it's also going to include values that aren't necessarily supposed to be there, like these sums and total columns, which effectively end up doubling your values. So how does that compare when we use this table structure over here instead? Well, if I come over to our table and I go to design, you can see that we have a number of different options here. For instance, I have here total row. So here I've got the 67 and a half thousand totals. You'll notice though that this row here actually kind of separates itself out from the rest of the data. If I get new data updated in here, this will basically just automatically shift down and recalculate. Now, what's more important though is that when other things are referring to this data set. Now, this table here has a name called table 2. We could give this a more meaningful name. Let's call it something like orders or something like that. Now, if we go to sum the values in this table, so let's just say sum, and I sum over these, you notice here that the formula refers to orders values. Now, this is important. One, because it is much easier to read than a formula which says J2 to J16, but also because we haven't specified a specific row number, which means that this thing can automatically grow or shrink when it needs to. Which again is not just important if you're using formulas, but it's also important for any other sort of chart or pivot table or other process which will automatically report your data for you inside of Excel. So let me show you some other immediate benefits of this. Now over here, if I click on these filters, I can select one of our categories. So let's just say large. So I'm filtering on just the large items here. Now you notice here that our total has only added up the items showing up in our filter, which is just the large items. If I come over to here, you can see that this value is still the same. It is still summing all of the values, even though that we can only see these values here. So as a filter option, this is much more useful, much more meaningful. It's also very easy to change the summary here. So right now we are using a sum. This could also be the standard deviation, min, max, or average with just the click of a button, which kind of makes it a lot more powerful than just your kind of standard sum formula over here. There's actually a lot more that I could talk about tables, but we're going to save that for another lecture.